Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining us. My name's Marie Coco, and
I'm Lesley Mosby.
We just spent 7 days in ACT Correctional Facility, and we wanted to give a chance to introduce ourselves and why we did that. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are doing this video and being held here on stolen land. And I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and also to the young leaders like War and Seed who are at the front line of the First Nations fight against the genocide that happened in this country. I'll just start. Like I said, my name's Violet. I'm a 30-year-old philosophy student, and I've been a full-time activist now for about 2.5 years because I believe it's my absolute moral duty to rebel against a government that's utterly failing us.
And I'm Lesley. I'm 59 years old today and got out of prison for my birthday.
Happy birthday!
I've been an armchair activist most of my life. The Black Summer bushfires a few years ago propelled me out of my armchair and into doing more substantial and meaningful action for climate change for the sake of my grandson and children and all future generations.
So as I said, we're just going to do a short video here. We've just gotten out, so we've prepared a little thing to say, and we'd like to share it with you. And I think Lesley starts.
Yep. Okay, so I'd just like to talk about the fact that we are incredibly privileged. Violet and I, being both white, middle class, I'm middle-aged, educated, fairly confident women, that this was an action that allowed us to capitalise on that privilege and make some really meaningful action. We realise that in this country we're fortunate. The punishment for crime in our country is loss of liberty. So when you enter the prison system, it's supposed to be only about loss of liberty. There's no human rights violations or violence or anything like that. So we were able to capitalise on that quite easily.
And I will just say, obviously, there are First Nations deaths in custody that we want to acknowledge.
Absolutely.
But, there are countries where it is much, much more dangerous to do this. And so we have a lot of privilege just for being in this country.
Yeah, and I tend to think that gives us more of an obligation to act in this country because we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate in that we could sign our bail papers at any time, so we knew we could leave, and we had each other to kind of help us through this. And as I say, our experience is not necessarily universal, and we would caution people, even though it's everybody's individual choice to whether follow a course of action like we have, you really should carefully consider this if you're a person of colour or from a vulnerable minority like the trans people, so on. They may not have the same experience of prison as we have. So I'd also encourage people to, if you're going to do this, come to Canberra to do it, or other capital cities at a minimum, but I'd be very wary about regional areas because we know there's a history of violence in the Australian prison system, especially for males and people of colour and other vulnerable minorities. And also, if you have active mental health issues, claustrophobia or physical disabilities, this might not be the right course of action for you.
Not to say that you can't do it.
You can.
But yeah, just
be aware. There was very little setup that I saw in there for anybody with disabilities, so it might be difficult. And there are always people who can't do this, who have dependents and are on visas and so forth. But there are many, many roles to play in XR, and so that we need people to fulfil all those roles to support those of us with the privilege who can actually take this step. So to us it was an honour to sacrifice our liberty for such a good cause. We know that future generations are depending on us, and that if we don't act now and act decisively, and for me, when I was thinking about how can I contribute to this, the most meaningful, significant, important thing I could do was to sacrifice my liberty, and I'm more than happy to do that. And I'm hopefully, as a person of the generation who allowed us to get to this state, I feel like it's making amends somewhat to my grandson and children of the future who are going to have to live with the mess we've left them with. Yeah, that's it. So I think over to you, Bob.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the emergency that we are in, just to frame the conversation that we're having about why we are in here. So we are on a trajectory that makes this planet unable to sustain life. On this path, billions will die. We already lost billions of animals last year, but we're talking billions of human lives as well. Scientists have coined this time the sixth mass extinction. The last mass extinction killed the dinosaurs, but it's possible that humans can go extinct. In fact, we've had climate-related extinctions before, but like this one, but it wasn't actually changing as fast then as it's changing now. So we've sped up the process of the heating of the planet by putting copious amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere through the burning of fossil fuels. And this is a human-created extinction event. But as well as coining this extinction event, the science is indicating that we can change the trajectory that we are on. We can stop the extinction, but to do this, we need a rapid transition to zero emissions and to halt biodiversity loss. Planting bunches of trees, which sucks carbon out of the atmosphere, and protecting our forests and oceans. They also say that there is only a certain amount of time to make these changes, or it will be impossible to do so. There's a point of no return in the climate system, which means that there is nothing that we will be able to do to stop the extinction event. It's predicted to be in the next few years. So if we wait to 2050 to zero out on emissions, it will kill billions of people, potentially all life on Earth. This is a situation where we either do enough or we don't bother and accept that we would rather die than change. So the threat to us is massive and immediate, but it's also solvable if we act fast. So there's actually much more to the problem than just CO2 in the atmosphere. Like, our oceans are due to die by 2030, devastating our oxygen supplies, as half of our oxygen is supplied from the ocean, and many places food supplies as well. So this is actually quite a complex issue, which is why we talk about Demand 3, citizens' assemblies to deal with it, which I'll talk about a bit later. But I would recommend that you actually do your own research on the extinction crisis and the climate and ecological emergency. You could go to a Heading for Extinction and What to Do About It talk by Extinction Rebellion, which will lay out the climate science and in a more detailed version what we're giving now. You're just getting a very small clip of what's going on. You could, what is other books?
Jem Bendell, a scientist from England, has some very good information about this. The Potsdam Institute, World Recognised Climate Institute, a great Australian climatologist called Will Stephan. They're all people that you can find quite easily on the internet. You don't have to take XR's word for this. This is coming from scientists who have nothing to do with us, and I encourage everybody to look into that for themselves.
Yeah, or you could listen to our worldwide treasure, David Attenborough, when he says that we risk the collapse of everything. And so we just really must move at emergency speed to stop this event from happening. So, I'll leave you with this, the next section.
Okay, so just quickly, I'd like to do a very quick scan of the methodology of civil disobedience, of peaceful civil disobedience. So it's a huge topic, and I really encourage people to look into it. It's fascinating. But we know from history that it has worked for many, many causes at many times and many places. And it's really just about a numbers game, folks. The more people we can get to engage in non-violent, peaceful civil disobedience, the better the chance we have of making this work. One of the reasons I joined Extinction Rebellion is because they have a plan. Nobody else seemed to have a plan. It was just do more of the same kind of thing to try to get a different result, which we all know is a bit futile. So I would encourage people to read up on XR if you're not already a member, and why we do what we do. So the civil disobedience theory goes that that is a strategy that we use. We engage in mass, as many people as possible engaging in peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience, and there's plenty of people in this organisation who are experienced and can come up with the kind of things that are going to get us some action. And we use that as a leverage then to cause material cost and disruption to the authorities. So the idea is that by filling up the criminal justice system and the prisons with people who are doing peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience, they have to feed us, they have to clothe us, they have to transport us, they have to do all of that stuff. And it is creating an impact in that system, which hopefully travels up the line of command to people who say, to governments where they say, you have to do something about this because we are not coping with the amount of people who are overwhelming the system. A really good example of that is the yellow vest protest that happened in France a couple of years ago, and look into that if you want to find out more about it. So the other great thing about peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience is we gain empathy from the public too. When people see that we are willing to take these extreme steps, and sort of ordinary little old ladies like me are willing to go to prison, it really underlines how important we think this issue is. And it shows that it's something that has to be dealt with by extreme measures because we're in an extreme situation. We need to know the sociological science of this. It's studied by a lot of the founders of EXA and other people. It's fascinating to read if you're into that kind of thing, but it does show it will work if we get the numbers. There's no way it won't work if we can get enough people to engage in various levels of peaceful, non-violent civil disobedience. And as I'm going to mangle this quote, so I apologise to Nelson Mandela, but it always seems impossible until someone does it.
So I'm just going to quickly run over EXA's demands. The first demand is...
Just remind us where we are.
Oh yeah, so just letting you all know, we're outside ACT prison. Lesley and I have just spent 7 days in the correctional facility, basically in solitary confinement except for 2 hours a day.
And we were together.
When we were allowed together. Yeah, we did that to highlight the climate and ecological emergency and watch the rest of the video. You've got your finger over the camera. Watch the rest of the video to see the whole thing, but which we'll post shortly. But yeah, I just wanted to say EXA's demands, which first one is to tell the truth. So the government must declare a climate and ecological emergency and work with institutions to communicate the urgency for change. So this should be front page news every day. ACT has declared a climate and ecological emergency. Melbourne City Council has declared a climate and biodiversity emergency. Sydney, Newcastle, actually hundreds of councils, thousands around the world have declared a climate and ecological emergency. And this is just about, acknowledging what it is so we can take the appropriate response to the situation. The second demand is act now. So we must zero out on emissions by 2025 and halt biodiversity loss. A scientist once told me that losing biodiversity is like taking bricks out of your house and expecting it still to stand. Australia is leading the way on mammal extinction. We're mammals, so we're part of that system. We're losing insects, which are pollinate our food. It's incredibly insane. And 2025 is like just as soon as humanly possible. We saw an immediate change with COVID when we recognized the threat. We could shift our whole society to in an appropriate response to the threat. That's what we need to do now. And our third demand, as I mentioned earlier, was citizens' assemblies, which is the government must be led by the decisions of a citizens' assembly on climate and ecological justice. And citizens' assemblies are a random and representative selection of the population. So it's 50% women, 50% men. We know that women make better choices when it comes to environment and social policy. That's just shown throughout history. That's a fact. And so having better representation of people of colour and all those vulnerable parties will help us make better decisions. And basically they come together, and rather than a two-party system where they're trying to win over each other, you're coming together to deliberate. So it's a really amazing thing that's been used all around the world for really contentious issues like the abortion debate in Ireland, and also in Australia we've used it 12 times before. So it's so important, and it just basically solves the problem for politicians who are trapped in the Murdoch empire
and fossil fuel lobbies that have bought out our politicians. This is why our system is broken, because they cannot possibly follow ecological and climate-based agendas, even if they want to, because they won't get the funding from the fossil fuel industries to run their election campaign. Politicians, it's an out for you. You leave it up to the people, and whenever people are given these decisions, it's people like you and me and everybody else, people do make the decisions that support their community and their families and their welfare, because we don't have vested interests. So it's a brilliant system. The people's assemblies. I encourage you to look into that as well.
Yeah, so basically from here, we've got another mass national action happening on June 10, which I really encourage you to engage in and get involved in a local group. We've got what date was the next national Zoom? Sunday the 30th is another national Zoom, and Lesley and I will actually be doing another live Zoom in a week's time to go through exactly what it was like inside. So we're going to be going through live. You can submit questions to us. We'll put information on how to do that, and we'll be talking through our direct experiences. So make sure you join us for that.
Yeah, I think it's important because I know as somebody with anxiety issues, the more I know about what I'm getting myself into, the more confident I feel to go ahead and do it. So I have taken so many notes about exactly what all the procedures and things were like, and our personal experiences of what it was like. It wasn't nearly as bad as we thought it would be.
No. But I just want to reiterate, that Lesley and I are just normal people. We were both sort of very scared to go in, but we really wanted to demystify this experience for you all so that we could do this as a group together, because it is going to take this strategy to save our planet, because as I said earlier, we are in an existential threat. We risk losing life on our planet's ability to sustain life. And so, I just really, really encourage you all to get engaged and rebel for life.
Yeah, there's no bigger issue humanity has ever faced, and to sacrifice 7 days of your liberty in relative comfort and safety is a small price to pay, to know that you are doing everything you can for future generations.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, Lesley.
No, thank you.
And see you all at the Zoom.